right, so I'm very excited to be joined today by Bradley Rorter, who is a very early crypto investor. There's actually a YouTube video of him from 2014, which is 7 years ago, where he gave a presentation on whether Bitcoin is the perfect currency and basically explaining everything from A to Z, why Bitcoin is superior, also going on macro stuff there. So it's probably safe to say that you're a real visionary in the space. And I think we're going to be talking just about some things today, and maybe we can have you on as well in the future more times, because I guess there's a lot you can share here, a lot of valuable things, especially for the new people that are now joining crypto. But yeah, first things first, thanks for joining. Thanks for taking the time straight out of Texas. How is everything going?
Good, Michael. It's great to see you. I've been looking forward to this.
Nice. Yeah, so I think my introduction was just very brief. Maybe you can expand on that. Also share your background in tech, how it all led to crypto and what captured you in that industry.
Okay, very good. Well, I started out as a child. I grew up on a farm in Iowa, which is a small state in the Midwest. And as a young man, I became very interested in the price of what we were growing, corn and cattle. And so at age 16, I became in charge of hedging our one corn contract on the family farm. So was always interested in the Chicago markets. After my undergraduate education at West Point in the Army, I raced back to Chicago and started trading there. And that was just at the time when the thought of financial futures had first arisen. And I thought that was going to be a really big idea. It was controversial at the time, kind of reminds me of crypto today. No one thought we needed derivatives or contracts on money. One old grain trader said, "We don't need any stinking futures contracts on money," but it seemed like a good idea to me because money was the largest commodity of all. So I helped pioneer FX trading and futures contracts on bonds and treasury bills. During that time, it was starting off slowly. So I got a job on Wall Street trading government bonds for E.F. Hutton. That was a wild time in the bond market. The spreads were very large. The bid-ask spread on the 30-year treasury bond was 0.5 point, to give some context. It was an inefficient market, but a burgeoning one at the time. I then went back to Chicago and set up institutional operations for A.G. Becker. And so I had a chance to trade on the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and the Chicago Board of Trade. So it was a really special time in my life. Grown men yelling, kicking, screaming, shoving, and spitting. It was fabulous. So as a result of sort of being in the right place at the right time, in order to diversify my trading, I would take money out of my trading account and pass it out to other risk takers that were focused on different markets and different strategies. So I literally began investing in this new asset class called hedge funds, starting in 1982. They weren't really even called hedge funds at the time. That name had not caught on. They were basically investment partnerships. But it was, again, it was really early days. The markets were inefficient. Some of the managers that I was lucky enough to find turned out to be very good at what they did. I was Ray Dalio's first customer when he opened up Bridgewater back in the early days. It was a fax service at the time. You probably don't know what a fax is, but it used to be an early method of communication.
Yeah, I remember what that is. Yeah.
I had the first fax machine in San Francisco. Do you know how I know that? I couldn't fax anybody anything.
There was no receivers.
Exactly.
Nice. Wow.
So the reason I left Chicago, I had come to the conclusion that as fun and as exciting as trading in the pits with open outcry was, it was tremendously inefficient, and I knew it was going to go away. while on Wall Street, I had done the first electronic trade in the bond market with a firm called Cantor Fitzgerald. I almost got fired for that trade because Wall Street was resonant about making their prices available to the market. But it was clear to me that maybe from my studies at the University of Chicago, I was going to night school at the graduate school, University of Chicago, learning about the efficient market theory. But during the day, I was trading in the pits, which were demonstrably inefficient. So it's quite a dichotomy. So I knew the pits were going away. So I moved west to San Francisco. I wanted to be closer to technology. I'm glad I did that. I continued to trade and invest in all kinds of alternative assets. And one day I found the internet. I'll never forget the day. I was walking down the Embarcadero 4 in San Francisco past the Hyatt Regency. Somebody had scotch taped a hand-scrawled sign to the inside of the window, and the sign said, "Internet Conference, second floor." I go, I wonder what that is. So I walked up to the second floor. There were 3 booths, 7 people, and I bought Rodder.com that day. It was in 1996.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah, that was the very, very early days, I think. And then a couple of years later, the whole .com bubble really, really blew up. How do you see the similarities between back then? Because obviously right now we have this giant conference in Miami. I think 5-6 years ago, the crypto conferences were also pretty small with just a couple of people there. How do you see the similarities between that time and crypto right now? Like when the whole internet came up and started?
Well, there are some distinct similarities and some dissimilarities. When I saw the internet, it changed my life. My friends from San Francisco still quote me as saying, in every conversation, this internet thing is going to be big. The difference between what I see in going on with digital currency and that of the internet is that when the internet started, it was literally San Francisco. There was a little bit going on in New York, but it was a San Francisco thing. The difference between the cryptocurrency world and the internet is that the internet, the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency movement was by definition worldwide from the very beginning. And it still is today. I like to say there's probably more going on in blockchain in Estonia than there is Palo Alto. And this is going to sound like a wild statement, at least to those that listen to me opine on this, but cryptocurrency is bigger than the internet. It's the internet of money. It's the internet of value. And so that's why I think it's attracted the brightest minds in the world. It's resulted in an explosion of growth that the world had never seen before. And so it's a big statement to say that cryptocurrency is bigger than the internet, but it really is. As Mark Andreessen said, they should have implemented a layer of value on the internet when it was first designed, but it was such a big idea at the time they never got a chance to work on that. But now we've got the best minds in the world working on just that.
Yeah, it's true. And I think a lot of people get stuck too much with the daily fluctuations of the token prices without seeing the bigger picture, right? Without zooming out a little bit and also trying to understand fundamentally where crypto and blockchain technology is heading towards. I think there's like different angles how you can see the space. There's also different degrees to which you can be involved in crypto, right? And I think most people are actually just like silent observers, right? They don't really care. They don't really want to understand how does crypto actually work? How does decentralized ledger technology actually work and positively impacts also the life of billions of people, right? It's much more inclusive, and there's so much more behind than just the price volatility of Shiba Inu, for example, right? So what are some other things that you find exciting in the long run, say 10, 20, 30 years, how crypto and blockchain will impact basically everything, society, industries, and everything?
Well, you know, Michael, I would go further on your comments that most people don't understand the real mechanics of cryptocurrency and how it operates. But I would go further in saying most people don't understand money. So the strongest trend that I've seen in my lifetime is the loss of purchasing power of the dollar. And it's very difficult to see when you're in the middle of it, because it's slow, it's continuous, and people just kind of get used to it. But the dollar has lost 95% of its value in my lifetime, and I'm still young. When I was a young man, a bottle of Mountain Dew cost a nickel in a vending machine, and today it's $2. So that's approximately 95%, which is why I, as an investor and as a U.S. citizen, I try not to own dollars. I do my very best not to own them, and to hold other assets that will be a better store of value. Bitcoin is near the top of that list. I learned about Bitcoin from a 14-year-old, and I always listen to 14-year-olds. In my career, I've made a habit of collecting millennials. Some guys collect cars, but I collect millennials, and it's helped me keep a pulse on things that are happening that some of the older generation tend to miss. Mm. So that was 2012. I got very excited about Bitcoin and told everyone that would listen about this new, what I call perfect currency. No currency is perfect, but Bitcoin is as close as we've come to a perfect currency. There have been many throughout history, not just fiat currencies, but before them there were cattle and skins and slabs of salt, just ways to evidence value that people could use to trade disparate things with value. But a slab of salt did not work very well if you were traveling in a rainstorm, which is why why it became attractive to use gold and silver coins and things like that. Most of the Bitcoin community sort of forsake those kinds of other assets like gold and silver, but I encourage them to consider them as part of the portfolio. It was in 2013 that I gave the first podcast I'd ever heard of was with a friend of mine named Michael Covell, who's out of Vietnam, and his podcast was called Trend Following Radio. And in that podcast, I was basically introducing to his listenership this new wild concept of digital currency. And I made the bold forecast that Bitcoin would be the highest performing financial asset of your lifetime. Wow. And so far, so good. I've never made price predictions. It's impossible to do that. Anybody that says Bitcoin's going to X price is not really worth listening to. But it is a perfect currency. And by that, I mean, it's the only currency in the history of the mankind that can't be printed. Mm. And mankind has never been able to resist the temptation of printing. The concept of printing started with the gold and silver coins. It was hard to print them, but they could knock off bits of the gold and silver coin, reduce the gold and silver purity in these coins. And so it's just been a temptation of man that man has never been able to resist. And as we find ourselves here in 2021, it's the governments around the world have shown that they cannot resist. They're in a steeplechase to see who can print more currency. And so it's a really good time not to own dollars. I saw I saw my old friend Ray Dalio mention this last week that he would prefer to own Bitcoin than bonds. I have to echo that sentiment. I say it a little bit differently. I say I would rather be waterboarded than own 30-year US Treasury bonds.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like you're saying, it has been a very also solid price performance or purchasing power performance, I would say, because simultaneously as the dollar inflates or devalues and inflates, I don't know if those numbers that we're given are even correct in terms of like 2 or 3% inflation a year. I think right now a lot of economic zones and countries and governments actually already warning us that, guys, please brace for a potential bigger inflation that is coming, right? Obviously, with all this printing in the last year since the crisis, it has to have some form of impact, right? And if you want to, like, if the listeners, if they want to learn what happens in hyperinflation, just look at Venezuela today or Argentina, right? Those countries, and you will know how it impacts directly the well-being and society, right? The well-being of the people and society as a whole. But so what yes?
I once did the largest transaction that was ever done on eBay at the time. I bought a $10 trillion Zimbabwe note for $9.95 free shipping. And I carried that around to all my talks about Bitcoin and so forth, just to show people what inflation can be. And the massive inflations that we've seen, like Zimbabwe and Germany and Argentina, those actually required that you actually had expensive ink and rare paper and a printing press. Now inflation theoretically can be substantially, exponentially worse, because now it's just a finger press on a keyboard, and you can create money. That's why I think the crypto market has become so excited about a currency that can't be printed.
Yeah, and when I was living in Medellin, Colombia, there was also a lot of Venezuelan people there, and we had a conference, and they had a booth where they were literally presenting Bolivar art, right? So they were making bags or some small statues or stuff like that out of Bolivar banknotes, because it's completely worthless. So that's crazy. But I mean, I hope that we will not have this again, especially in bigger economies. That's why I think also the rise of central bank digital currencies and other forms of digital money that are probably centralized, but at least have programmable inflation and mechanisms to protect us from hyperinflation. I think that is probably going to be as well the future. But one thing that I like about you, well, many things, but specifically this thing, is that you're not a maximalist, right? You're not just focusing on one thing and like, man, that's the only thing, Bitcoin and everything else is a scam. You're very open. You're very open to different things. You're a seed investor in Cosmos, which is a project that I'm covering here a lot.
Yeah.
My channel. You're a seed investor also in Casper, in NOIA, or now it's called Syntropy. Previously it was NOIA. Yep. IPW. So talk us a little bit about your kind of, well, probably two things, I guess. First, your multi-chain vision, right? How do you see this all come together? Do you see how do you view cryptocurrencies and different blockchains? And also, what is your investment thesis? Like, what makes you want to invest and diversify also your money in crypto?
Well, as I said before, this is definitely a global phenomena. And the reason that we've seen this Cambrian explosion of 10,000 different currencies and ideas is that because of the economic benefit of this currency, it's attracted the finest minds. But because of that, it's also caused an acceleration in the development, and something changed in our lifetime that never really changed before. That was the unit of time. It was fixed for most of history. It changed a little bit with the the carrier pigeon. It changed a little bit more with the telegram. It changed a lot more with the telephone. And when the internet happened, it changed everything. This is basically the internet of money. And I like to say, does the internet deserve its own currency? Of course it does. Now, which currency that's going to be is we will know in the future. There is so much development going on. The analogy I use, it's like having 1,000 golf foursomes playing universal best ball. Mm-hmm. Someone comes up with a new idea of smart contracts or of decentralized exchanges, and everybody runs there and begins building from there. We're at very early days. Smart contracts are fascinating, but they're not really. They're not smart, and they're not contracts. So I think we're at the beginning stages of what the internet of money looks like and how it will be secured and transmitted. In terms of projects, Bitcoin is elegant and takes up a lot of my headspace. But other projects like Bitcoin SV is very intriguing to me, and I've spent a lot of time learning about that. It has marvelous applications for setting up the world's database, which I think would be very valuable. I've gotten to know some of the players there, including several very long video conversations with Craig Wright. BSV now has the ability to store basically about 1 gigabyte per block, and so one can fast forward and realize the benefit of a world database where we only have to store one file once and everybody can have access to. On the utility side, the developments in say NOIA networks, for example, is a fascinating project. They have figured out a concept called network segmentation that utilizes an intelligent mesh of nodes that are all chatting with each other, and these nodes can instantaneously figure out the path that your packet could take that would speed up the relative speed by 10x and give you a free VPN along the way. It's the analogy I use. It's like Waze. Have you used the travel app WAZE?
Yeah.
NOIA is Waze for packets. And everybody involved is looking for the best path, just as your car is doing on Waze when you become part of the data that Waze is using to direct you to your destination. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, glad that you shared some insights here. I mean, obviously BSV has a lot of controversy around, right? With Craig Wright and all those kind of things. To be honest, I haven't looked into the tech side of things, right? And I think most people haven't because of the whole narrative, around Craig Wright and all those kind of things. But yeah, that's also crypto, like the crypto space is still very, very small. It's still very early days. So those kind of affiliations for some people might be very, they might be a trademark with that. But what are some... Yeah.
On one of my calls with Craig, I said, Craig, I've used the same line in every talk I've given about Bitcoin. He said, what's that? I said, well, Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever she is, deserves the Nobel Prize. And he laughed and he said, I've got a big ego, but I never thought of it that way. And I said, I'm dead serious. Satoshi Nakamoto had a greater impact on humanity than did Christianity, or will have a greater impact on humanity. That's a big statement.
It is, yeah. But eventually, Bitcoin has the potential, at least, to become a global form of money, right? A global form of money that is much, much, much more accessible to the people. And it's also, I think, the first time to see it maybe from a different aspect, that we're separating money from state, right? So we never had that before. It was always kind of like closely affiliated from government and from the state. But now we have the people's money, right? I think Robert Kiyosaki calls Bitcoin also the people's money, right? It's invented by whoever she is, and it's just there. It just works. It can't be tampered. It's built on this triple entry accounting model, which basically makes it entirely tamper-proof, right, and robust also for censorship and those kind of things. That's really the beauty of Bitcoin and also other DLT projects. So you mentioned already two of them. Do you have any other projects that you're eyeing right now? Maybe also projects that are still like, you know, inside alpha leaks that you can share?
Sure. You know, I'm spending most of my time on a project called IPWE, in which I was the seed investor and now serve on the board. IPWE is putting the world's patent system on a blockchain. And I view that as being very fundamentally important for a big holistic reason. And that is, if we can modernize the world's intellectual property, we will then accelerate and lubricate the development of innovation. And my theory is that the development of innovation will improve the human condition. So from a global macro point of view, that's one of the most important projects that I will see.
Okay, interesting. And I think they also have closed a partnership with Casper, right? That's also a project that you're invested in. Yeah. Maybe can you share
I may have had something to do with that.
I guess so, yeah. So what are your thoughts on Casper now that we're talking about it? I think they are one of the most interesting proof of stake smart contract platforms with the CBC research that started in 2014 by Vlad Zamfir. What is your thoughts on Casper? Also now that the coin is live.
You know, I think Casper has an important opportunity because for enterprises to adopt the blockchain, Ethereum's pretty damn complicated and it's changing all the time. There will be more coming later, so it's challenging to develop on, and the sands are shifting. I think Casper has a very important opportunity ahead of it because it's sleeker, easier to use, easier to develop on. And I think that there will be a special category for enterprise utilities. I'm introducing Casper and NOIA networks next week because NOIA is without question an enterprise application. NOIA's first customer is Intel, and so if I'm right and they can work together, you would have an enterprise blockchain that would also be more secure and demonstrably faster than its competition. So I think those kinds of combinations become very interesting. Consumers want a solution. There are simply too many currencies at the moment. I can't keep track of them. I try my best, but it's happening. It's a Cambrian explosion and it's happening very quickly. The problem is that we've dissipated the energy by focusing on all of these different protocols, all these different blockchains, all these different currencies. The analogy I like to remind people of in the beginning of the United States, when railroads were first developed, there were hundreds of different railroad companies, and there was no standard definition of the track size. So one railroad company would have a track this big, and their competition would try to save money and have a narrow gauge. But the result was it was not a national network. When one railroad company got to the end of its tracks, they would have to stop the train and unload everything onto the next train that was using a different rail size. It was completely inefficient. So I think that's kind of where we are in cryptocurrencies right now. Cosmos was an interesting play because it bridged those different blockchains so they could talk to one another. But I think you'll see more specialization as we go down the road. And
I agree. I think there's a lot of room for also a lot of alternative approaches to resolve the same problem eventually, right? And I think more specialization in the future is definitely the case. Also, if you see on a macro level how much money is actually flooding into the crypto and blockchain industry, into research, into sourcing new talent, right? A lot of universities now are implementing blockchain labs or crypto labs. And a lot of young people are actually also interested to not just be silent observers, but also also spend time learning about how they could probably build a product or something like that, right? And I think also geographically, we have a lot of diversification, right? For example, one project I also talk here about my channel is Clayton, and Clayton is this blockchain project from Korea, South Korea, that is basically led by Kakao Talk or Kakao, right? So that's the largest messaging app in Korea. And even though it's basically an Ethereum fork with advanced, like they made their own flavors to it, right? They added their own proof of stake consensus algorithm. But just geographically, you know, people in Korea are they are used to Kakao, right? So if the company behind launches a new chain or a new product, they're already kind of like affiliated to it, right? And used to it. So I think we'll see more like that geographically as well, in Latin America, Africa, right? Especially those emerging nations and regions. I think we're going to see a lot of things coming from there as well in the future. But to wrap things kind of up, I think we can do this again. There's a lot of value here. But in a world of Shiba Inus and Elon tweeting about, today he was tweeting about come rocket again, Dogecoin and all those kind of meme coins and stuff like that. I know there's a lot of people now that are just brand new to crypto. They don't maybe care to understand even like the fundamentals, the long-term vision, DLTs and those kind of things. What would be your recommendation to them to maybe not get burned too much? Based on your experience?
You know, I'm smiling. I found Dogecoin in 2014. It's kind of a funny story. I went to a meetup in San Francisco, a Dogecoin meetup. There was 1,000 people at this meetup. Meetups are usually 7, sometimes 8 people. There were 1,000 people. I counted the chairs. 1,000 people and 6 dogs.
All Shiba Inus or?
Yeah,
probably.
I mean, just as it's I mean, it's kind of it's a meme and a joke coin, but when 1,000 people show up to a meetup, it means something.
So how do you view this? And again, for the new people who are now joining, I know they probably just want to invest and make quick money. But what would be your number one recommendation to them, if you could just give one or maybe 2?
I recommend always be contrarian. So my antenna started going up at the end of 2017 when, you know, there was just 20 coins a day being issued and people were not paying attention to value or utility. I began to get nervous this spring when all of the Twitter profiles had laser eyes. That's a bad sign. Yeah. It means everybody's in the same side of the boat. I recommend to my crypto compatriots that they don't own just cryptocurrencies. Gold and silver has held its value for a long time and probably will continue to do so. The biggest risk in cryptocurrencies right now is an electromagnetic pulse event, EMP. Most people aren't aware that there's already been an attack on the United States in EMP, and it was in 1863. It was an attack from the sun. A magnificent solar flare hit the United States and knocked out the only electrical system we had at the time. which was the telegraph system. So I have Rotter's rule number 33 is there's never ever been a weapon ever made that was never ever used. There will be an EMP attack. All of the major adversaries have developed them, and it's an insidious weapon. It's a perfect weapon. It's the most dangerous weapon ever made, and it doesn't kill anybody the first day. So that's when holding a few ounces of gold and silver might come in handy, because in an EMP attack, you won't lose your Bitcoin, but you won't be able to access them until you can get to Antarctica and find a laptop, if by chance you can remember your keys. So it's very important to be diversified. It's very important to be contrarian. When you see things like everybody with laser eyes on the screen, it means they're already long and the market's vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, crypto grows and falls in cycles, right? I think the long-term trend is crystal clear, right? We're going up. It's a whole industry being built from scratch. I agree. It makes sense to also hold physical gold or silver or precious metals. I don't have any for now, to be honest. I'm all in crypto right now. But it also depends on your personal risk tolerance. It also depends on your personal situation, right? Probably if I had a family and kids, I wouldn't probably be all in crypto, simply because it's so risky. And I keep reminding my people on my channel here, like, guys, this is all, eventually it's all experimental early technology, right? Sure, the odds are very high that we are going to build this internet of value, and the direction is clear, like I said, but there's always still some sort of risk attached, especially if you are a little bit emotional, right? And that's what most people are. I mean, I'm a horrible trader. I'm a horrible day trader, especially. I mean, I never really did it, but when I tried to do it, I always lost money, right? Because I don't have my emotions under control. But there's a lot of things, and people tend to buy peaks, right? People that are not really deep into that, they don't really understand the fundamentals, they buy the peaks, right? And I made this video here on my channel a few weeks ago when Shiba Inu was literally, like, there was just this straight line up, right? On the charts, like a straight line up. So it was already on the moon. And when a chart is like that, it means you're making other people rich. You're not getting rich, probably, right? So I think there's a lot of things to see this from, like you were saying, with this kind of like, how is it called, EMP events that could eventually, or quantum computers, right? A lot of people see quantum computers as a threat. Not sure how much truth is to that, but there's still risks in crypto. If it's not from an external black swan event, then maybe even your own emotions that might cost you a lot of money, right? And crypto is still Wild West. It's still not fully basically not regulated in most nations at all, right? So there's still a long way to go. But at the same time, that also means opportunity, right? So that's how I view the space. And yeah, maybe to wrap it up, you can share some final thoughts, and also yeah, just share what you're currently, what's your next steps also in the crypto space, what you're working on and busy with.
Speaking of quantum, I'm actually hedging my crypto exposure with some bets in quantum computing. So I'm very excited about that space, and it's moving very, very quickly as well. I think quantum computing will someday allow us to figure out women.
Wow, that seems impossible.
So I saw Mike Novogratz a couple of days ago made the statement that Bitcoin will never be used for payments, and he was dead right about that, but wrong about the reason. His point was that it's too slow and too clunky, and does not have the power for enough transactions per second. He's right about that. And again, the crowd is working on that. BSV is blazingly fast and cheap, but that's not the reason why cryptocurrencies are going to be problematic for payments. It's something completely different. The reason is taxes. The reason why no one is using Bitcoin to buy a double decaf non-fat latte, if you do so and you're following your country's tax code, you would have to then, or at the end of the year, figure out the capital gains of that $6 for using that you're using to buy the cup of coffee. It's less problematic if you're using stable coins, but even then, if you're strictly following the tax code and you're using tether that you bought for 1.008 and you're buying a cup of coffee with a tether that's then worth 1.0010, you would by law have to figure out the capital gains on that transactions. No one's going to do that. And that's why the rise of central bank digital currencies will probably be the solution for day-to-day payments, not for a store of value. It's quite the opposite, because those digital central bank currencies will be designed to be printed, because that's what governments do. But that's in my book the reason why we don't use Bitcoin for day-to-day payments. It's a tax issue.
Yeah, but I think, like you said, CBDCs are definitely coming. China's they already have 10 million users, and it's already getting rolled out there. I think other nations, even the US, Europe, we're also now finally doing our homework, and it's coming. So yeah, but that was a great conversation. Given the attention span and the attention span in the crypto community these days, I think we should wrap it up here, and maybe have you on next time. It would be my pleasure. I think there's a lot more that you could share, and also talk about different crypto projects. So yeah, thanks for taking the time, and thanks for being here.
Let's talk every day.
Sure, man.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, man. Take care.